Hello, hello. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write, where I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors. I'm joined by Martin and Richard, and we are going to discuss our cover design process for our books, how we got there, who we used, whether we did it on our own, and what the end results were and whether or not we're happy with it. So let's take it away. Martin, can you give yourself an introduction? Who are you? What's that lovely poster behind you? And how did you, in general, just really generic, how did you design your cover?
My name is Martin. I am one half of Bradley Lejeune, the author team behind the McMurdo Rift series. Me and Richard are here because we won the Authortube Egg and Spoon race to appear on Running to Write, and we're very pleased to be here. So I designed the cover myself using VFX software like a normal person.
It also helps that you have a visual arts background, so that really puts you ahead of, say, somebody like me who is artistically illiterate.
Clearly, you're not artistically illiterate because you've written a wonderful book. But
just wait, I have the draft version of my cover right here. It's a hand-drawn sketch, so you'll get to see that in just a few minutes.
He's hooking us in from the start. That's storytelling, folks. And I was a visual effects artist for French TV in a previous life, so I had a background going into this of what I wanted to accomplish and how to go about doing it. I'm a big believer of emulating the results you want, not necessarily the techniques to get there. I was originally going to sit down and do it all in Photoshop, but trying to find ways to do it didn't really come to me, whereas I knew how to do it in After Effects. And I figured a 4K comp would be large enough for print, and that all worked out.
Nice, nice. And Richard, who are you? What book did you create? And how did you design the cover?
Hi, I'm Richard. I surely at this point need no introduction, but I will introduce myself anyway. I'm Richard Holliday. I'm the author of Nightmare Tenant and other books coming soon. Subscribe to my newsletter. And much like Ben, I am about as graphically artistic as a jam sandwich. So I paid someone to make this.
Nice. And what service did you use?
So I used a creator on Fiverr called German Creative, who was recommended to me by Hannah Palmer, who's another indie author. It was kind of an interesting process. I've never actually commissioned a cover before. For some of my previous stuff, I've kind of cobbled it together in Photoshop. But I knew the vision I had for this particular cover, my skills, limited and rudimentary as they are, I just couldn't cut it. So I did create like a very rough concept for what I wanted, and with some imageries and stuff like that. So I just sent it over to German creative. Her name's Les. She is in Germany, I believe. I hope so. Anyway, that's her name. And you know, I got the result back, and I have to say I was just thrilled to bits with the whole kind of process. And yeah, no, I'm really pleased with how this came out. I really think it sets the tone for the book, pretty much down to the ground. But yeah, and the process was very easy, I thought.
Excellent. And you are currently working on your next book, and I happen to have had many discussions with you, so I know kind of I'm going to lead you into this, but you are using Meeble art currently, so I definitely am curious about your process there, even though you haven't really advanced far in there because you're still waiting for the first draft.
That's right. I mean, I decided to use Meeble art wholly based on seeing your cover, Ben, and I was absolutely kind of floored by the kind of quality and the vividness that they seem to have created. So the kind of reason I didn't want to just use my current cover design was not because I was unhappy with the results, but because I'm trying to build up like a sort of, you know, a rotation of cover designers that I can use as and when the project kind of demands. And with my new book, Price War, which is coming out hopefully in Q1 2023, and so subscribe to my newsletter to find out about that. I wanted to go for something a bit more kind of stylized and object-oriented, I think. And so I've sent them a brief. They've been very professional in how they've kind of handled it. And so we are now just waiting to see what their good creative minds cook up.
You're all on my channel, and hopefully you know that I have a book falling through. I'm also in the process of publishing the sequel to that, which means that I have the cover all ready to go. And so I'm going to discuss that process. I use Meeple art for both of them, which is kind of cool because the first book, I just went to them with some ideas. And then the second time around, I had to say, by the way, this is a part of a series, so please try and match the second cover to the first. So that was a little process on its own, which I can discuss and showcase and sort of walk you through the process because it was kind of interesting. I'm going to spoil it a little bit, but the first draft that I received was a great cover. It was beautiful. It was very realistic. And it would have ironically been a good cover for the first book, except it no longer matched the first book's cover. So there would be a clash if I decided to use that one. So
I have a question, Ben.
Yes.
Did you, when you commissioned cover 1, did you state it was going to be a series?
I did not. Although the subtitle is Into the Void Book 1, which kind of implies that there will be others, and I think you can get series discounts if you keep going back to them. I also had no idea
so they could kind of design the book,
right?
The book cover, thinking ahead that it's going to be a series of book covers, kind of like thematic and match across them.
And that would have been something smart to include. However, I did not do that.
Are you guys comfortable talking about what you paid for your covers?
Yeah, absolutely. Just give me 1 second here, because this will be airing the Monday after. Sorry. This will be airing the Monday before Thanksgiving. So for my American viewers, I hope you enjoy the time with your family and that you stay safe. This Wednesday is the most dangerous day to be on the road, so if you can avoid driving, I say go for it. Instead, you can curl up on the couch with some great books like McMurdo Rift or Nightmare Tenant. Thank you.
So are you saying that Americans drive particularly poorly on Thanksgiving?
I'm saying that statistically speaking, that is one of the worst days for drunk driving.
So don't go running.
I don't know. I go running at 6 a.m. Nobody's going to be... well...
Strange person.
Yeah.
What kind of lead time did your designers need?
Everything was done in 2 or 3 weeks. Total. From conception to me initially reaching out to them to the end results.
Because a lot of these guys get booked up months in advance.
Mm-hmm.
And quite often, one of the reasons for getting a series discount is it's much easier to get all the elements and design a cover and then make the others match it at once than it is to come back months later. Right. It's much easier for them to design a cover and then match the series at once than it is to come back months later and then try and make it all look in style.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. For me, I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know how long it would take me to go from book 1 to book 2. And I basically told them I'll see you all in a year at the earliest for book 2 to book 3. So I do plan on going back to Meeple Art, but it seems like they have a rotating group of artists themselves. So yes, a couple of people who I reached out to wouldn't have been able to design the cover before I had hoped to get this book published. I think I started reaching out basically once I published my first book. So mid-August, I started reaching out to people for potential cover designs. And a lot of people said they would work through September. They would be able to meet that deadline. But a lot of other people said they couldn't really, they were fully booked till the end of the year. So I couldn't, so I kind of stuck with Meeple Art, but I was sort of trying to branch out just to see what other options were out there. And most of the options were gone.
So my question to that is, would you have gone with any other cover designer for book 2 than the one you went for?
My biggest concern was whether or not they could match the design type of the first book. So it does kind of have a little cartoony feel. It's not very photorealistic. Even though there is a person on there, it has a very unique design to it. So if the cover designer can match that, then I would have definitely gone with them.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, to circle back to your earlier question, Martin, I paid $300 for this cover designer, including the media package as well. And I believe that's about what I paid for the previous one with book 1.
Mm-hmm.
So it is pricey, but I feel like I definitely got my money's worth. They are extremely talented. and I'm very happy with the end result.
So I think on that point, you do, to a degree, get what you pay for. I mean, I actually was quite surprised at the price of this. I think I paid about £125 for this package. So I kind of feel there is, again, there's the argument between you get what you pay for, and it's easy to get kind of overcharged in a way, because I know some authors, they spend several hundreds of dollars, like in the sort of $1,000. I keep thinking, you compare that to some of this, it's a bit like buying the brand name. You don't always get the best just because you spent the most money. So it's just about finding that balance.
Often what you're paying for is like exclusive elements or exclusive rights to a model or design elements that won't be used in stock sites. And for certain writers at certain points of their career, that's something that they are interested in. But no, you can get surprising amount for not very much. And especially if you can find someone who's both, hungry and on the way up. And then you run the risk of when you come back for books 2 and 3, they're no longer in your price range.
Right. And also you can get very lucky with Fiverr if you want to do simpler designs. Like if you have a person on the cover, that's going to obviously drive up the price because there's a lot more designs in there. Or if you have, say, a spaceship in there, like a custom thing that you have to include, that will also drive up the price. But if you have a simpler design, maybe not necessarily as photorealistic, or just a general theme across the cover, that should drive down the price. So you can still get really incredible covers if you're using Fiverr, or if you're designing it yourself. I mean, we are friends in the Authortube community, and I've watched several other people who have explained how they themselves design their covers. Like SD Houston came up with some really creative, flowery designs for her cover, and the centerpiece is the title, but it's sort of surrounded by, again, these various themes, flowery themes that get explored within her story. But there's no, centerpiece person. So that really helped her design it herself.
I mean, following on from that, I think when you're researching what you want your cover to look like, you need to look at genre and how your book is going to fit on the shelf, as it were. And your book kind of needs to be quite congruent to what the readers are expecting. So for me, I did spend a bit of time researching kind of like what horror or thriller covers look like. And I didn't want to sort of be too much of an iconoclast when it comes to that. I kind of wanted my book to kind of stand out but fit in at the same time and not be totally like... I mean, if I'd done this in like Comic Sans, rainbow colours, it just wouldn't have suited the mood of the book or the genre, because I think one of the biggest things we learn early on, even as readers, is don't judge a book by its cover. That is actually wrong now. It's wrong, because your cover is the first thing your reader will see, and you need to kind of be what they're expecting when they go onto the horror or the thriller or the fantasy section on Amazon, for instance. But yeah, you need to also be standing out as well as fitting in to a degree. So you can kind of be jostling for position, but you can't be like in a totally outlandish kind of like thing, because it just won't gel.
So you're saying you're not supposed to just take your favourite scene and slap that on, even if it makes no sense to someone who's not read the book yet?
Can we talk about Shannon's cover?
I'd rather not, because this, she's not on here to discuss, but we can definitely elaborate on what Martin just said, because that is my theme for my books.
I'm confused. I feel like you're implying that I'm referencing someone that I'm not.
Oh no, because I'm going to bring the cover slides in here so we can sort of walk through the process. But my covers are based off like a specific scene within my story.
Well, the point that Dick is making is that you want your book cover to have someone go, one of those, when they see it.
Fair enough.
Make it be very clear what genre it is, and it wants to fit on the shelf with all the others in the top 100.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I'm going to bring the slideshow up so that way we can see sort of the evolution of our stories. And Richard, you were up first.
Not looking forward to this.
Yeah, you can just walk us through. So on the leftmost is what you sent to the cover design artist, correct?
Yeah, so let me just sort of talk you through what happened here. On the left, we have my initial concept that I threw together in Photoshop in about 10 minutes after scouring basically a few stock image sites. I thought, right, here's kind of like the ingredients of my cover. So we've got the tower block, we've got the corridor, we've got the kind of creepy alleyway, and I've kind of got where the title wants to be. So I sent that to my designer and I said, can you make this look like some of the comp covers that I'd researched in the kind of horror thriller genre? And I specified that I wanted some kind of creepy lights coming out from some of the windows, which is what we got. And so then we got the kind of middle image, which was the first draft, and I was really I remember opening that email and I was smiling from like ear to ear because I just couldn't believe in a very pleasant way that my book cover had been transformed into that. There's so many kind of like little details, like there's the sort of crispiness on the kind of text that seems to be kind of like flowing away. There's this kind of texture. It's all kind of blended in really well. And there's like the birds flying as well. So the designer kind of got that it was a horror book and what to expect and kind of threw in all these kind of extra elements. So when I got that, what I didn't do was accept the first draft, which I know some people do, which is a bit of an ish move. So the revision process for this was fairly simple. I just kind of looked at it, I thought, I want the text to be more central, because as you can see, there was like sort of horizontal line that kind of lends itself to having the text there, which is really good. And a crucial thing that I did between the middle image and the right image was you'll notice that my author name becomes bolder. Now, the way I did this, because as authors, we need to realize that we are the brand. We are the brand. Your name needs to be seen there. It is important. So what I did is I took a tip from Martin, and when I had this cover delivered to me, hi Martin, when I had this cover delivered to me, it comes in a really high resolution, gorgeous kind of like image, but you have to think the reader is not going to see it at that high resolution pretty much ever, especially if they're buying it online as an ebook. They're going to see it as like a postage stamp sized image. So what I did at Martin's suggestion, which was a really good tip that I would recommend to everyone when they commission a cover, I resized it to roughly the size it would appear at on Amazon.com, for instance, or on one of these platforms. And I noticed that my name was not strong enough. So I went back to the designer and said, look, can we just move the, I love it. Can we move the title down a bit so it's more central? And can we make my author name more prominent so that when you're scrolling through the hundreds and hundreds of books on Amazon, you'll be able to see this is a book by Richard Holliday. And it's all about those, because you only get that kind of one brief instant to kind of hook the reader for the first time. So yeah, that was my kind of tip, is to, I borrowed this from Martin really, so it's no consequence. I'm going to, appropriate it as my own thing, is to just make sure you resize the cover to the image that the customer is going to see it as. Because like I said, this is your first kind of marketing tool. It's the first thing people are going to see. They're going to be like, ooh, or and you want it to be an ooh, not an if that makes sense. So definitely resize it to that sort of size the reader is going to see it at, to see if there's any problems that need to be corrected.
Yeah, scroll through the app on your phone and take a screenshot to see just how small these things are when they're viewed that way, and see how it holds up.
And it holds up fantastically well. I'm just so impressed of how your concept carried through from the draft to the final version, and I mean, I don't want to make it sound, you know, too crass, but it basically is like your image that you sent them just under a horror filter. Like it works so perfectly, and they really did a wonderful job.
I think so.
Setting the mood based on what you sent them.
Yeah. No, totally. I totally agree. I think they did a wonderful job. And what I really enjoyed about this cover is when you look at it, there's always some little detail that is there to be found. And I think that's really good. There's a lot of kind of like, it kind of draws the eye in a bit. But you're fully aware from the minute you look at this cover what you're kind of in for. You're in for sort of like a spooky, creepy kind of thriller horror story. And yeah, like Martin said, it's just crucial to kind of iron out these kind of like bugs where you see, you know, you make sure your name is prominent, because not just the cover needs to not just symbolize the book, but it needs to symbolize you as well. And it is possibly one of the most powerful marketing tools you have. Because like I said, we all like to think people don't judge a book by its cover, but we do, subconsciously or otherwise. So yeah, you need to make sure that you've kind of tested it out at the size that it's going to be seen. Because I have some lovely kind of prints of this cover, and it looks fantastic. Like that size, for instance, behind me, that's the prequel. But virtually no one is going to see it that size. So you need to just kind of be able that you're getting a product that is going to work across a multitude of kind of sizes and mediums. And I think this cover works. I think Martin's works. I think Ben's cover certainly works. I mean, Ben's cover would look fantastic on the side of like a bloody building.
Well, you were saying that that no one really sees the version behind you in the poster. I'm surprised you aren't just walking up and down the street, just carrying that around on your way to work and everything.
He's got a sandwich board.
I've got a sandwich board.
Nice. That's awesome. All right, let's move on to Martin.
Hey, it's that guy I am.
Mm-hmm. So would you mind walking us through the process that you used to design it, where the idea came from, and how you had the guts to just design it yourself? I mean, yes, you are taking from your own experiences of working the visual medium, but that is still incredibly impressive.
So initially, I took about half a dozen covers from the top 100 Kindle store in the sci-fi section, and I looked at like what I was seeing repeated, and there was a lot of spaceships and planets. And for the longest time, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to pull off a spaceship, because a 3D model is going to cost you about $300. You know, and then you need the 3D software, then you need to light it, and you need to render it. And then it turns out you can just buy renders of ships for a pittance. So that really saved my bacon. And I knew I wanted a sort of a nebula to sort of get some color in there, and played around with After Effects with the fractal noise to try and get it just so. And then the big problem was the typography, because when you go through all the different sites for different typefaces, you'll often have a license, and 9 times out of 10 that will just be for non-commercial, which is great right up until you want to put it on something you're selling. And then I ended up finding Orbitron, which was completely public domain, that just had exactly the right look for what I wanted.
Yeah, so Richard, sorry to double back, but did you design and choose the font yourself, or is that something that the...
Oh, no.
Okay.
I gave my designer free rein to do whatever font they wanted, and I think they kind of went for the right one. But yeah, I think Martin, you made the right choice with this font, because like I was saying, that cover resize, you got good contrast on the title and the name of the author, which is, I think, key. And it doesn't get in the way of the actual kind of like scene you're trying to depict, which is quite eye-catching. Because you look at that cover and you think, oh, what's this spaceship? What's it doing there? Where is it? So you're already asking a lot of questions, or posing a lot of questions in the reader's mind, just at a first glance. And I
the
think it's
McMurdo
really
Rift?
interesting. I think you are really interested. It's really interesting that you can get those 3D assets relative kind of like commodity price, because like you were saying, maybe sometimes you think to do everything you want to do in that space is going to cost a fortune, but you made it work.
Yeah. Did you try? Sorry, Martin. Did you try a bunch of different fonts, or did you just kind of stick with, or did you just find Orbitron and just recognize that that was exactly what you wanted?
I spent an evening just going through various sites, finding sans fonts that worked, and then reading right through the licenses to see if I could actually use them, and then moving on to the next one.
My question to Martin is, at any point did you consider Comic Sans?
No. You do see, every now and again, you'll see a book that's used papyrus. And you just think, why?
You could have gone the completely alien route and done wingdings.
I mean,
Marketing tool, Ben.
Martin, if papyrus was good enough for Avatar, surely it's good enough for your cover.
Indeed not.
Now, which avatar are you referring to, Richard?
The one that used papyrus, obviously.
With the subtitles.
All right. Well, I'm going to shift over to myself with the original, with the as I walk you all through the process. So I start off with the second book. I had a concept idea of what I wanted to include with the cover, and as I hinted at, it was a hand-drawn sketch. So without any further ado, this is what I was working with. So you have, it's difficult to see, but you have this nebulous figure right here, kind of reaching for two characters down here. I had a whole bunch of hand-drawn notes all around, based on the fact that they are stick figures, based on the fact that this is a very barely, it's supposed to be a monster, but it's barely humanoid, I guess, is probably the best way of thinking about it. So this is proof that I should never be in full control of designing the cover, because there's a long way to go between this and turning it into anything interesting. Now, that being said, the first version of what I ended up with, the draft, is this. Now, I did include the watermarks here. For some reason, in the original version, they sent me one without it. So, as we mentioned in the pre-show, I could have technically and illegally used this image for my cover without paying for it, which would have been all kinds of wrong. But I manually added in some watermark there, so this has nothing to do with what they normally do. And you can see everything they included, where you have the giant monster in the centerpiece. You had these two characters kind of in the lower right. They're inside a park, and it's very foggy. I don't think I asked for the fog, and I think that was one of the big issues that we had. Because this, again, as I mentioned in the pre-show, this would have been a very interesting and accurate picture for what could have worked in my first book. However, because I already had that first book, this style no longer matches that more cartoonish feel. And I got a couple of slides to go, but I'll show you a comparison of what I have for the first one and what I have for the second one side by side, so you can see that those two match, whereas this one feels kind of like an X-Files type book, which isn't what I was trying to convey. And so I had a really hard time explaining what I wanted, but basically I sent them the first book and explained, can you try and get it to match this? And that led us to these, which are much, much better. And you can see there's a couple of slight changes. Going from the left is the version, I guess, 1.0, if you assume that the draft is 0, to the right, which has a few other slight distinctions. There are a couple of things which I wanted to change going from 1 to 2, namely that the monster is more smoky than humanoid. And if you look carefully enough, I will mention this. The figure on the left, the version 1.0, has a codpiece, which, as this monster is not human or in any way living, it should not have any type of that article of clothing.
So what you're saying is then in version 1, the monster was too well endowed.
Yes. And there's also this levitating pillar, which doesn't really correlate to the two characters on screen. So we moved it over to
like a TV remote.
It's also true. could look like that. But I did really like how they had sort of electricity coming around it, which makes it feel very in motion, which is good. It just doesn't fit with my story. And again, going from a portal to a crack. Yes, I'm sure Richard is holding back considerably to not make fun of the title of Expanding Cracks. But yeah, I am really
Expanding
happy.
Voids.
Exactly. And I'm really happy with the end result. They took my feedback and we were able to work out exactly what we wanted in a way that got me the end cover design that I was really, really hoping for. I mean, I was stunned even with version 1.0 when I saw that. I was like, wow, this is almost exactly what I wanted.
Did you have that same kind of sensation when you first opened the draft for book 1, where you're kind of smiling from ear to ear thinking it's real now? Absolutely.
And it's actually more interesting with book 1 because I basically just sent them a paragraph of like, hey, here's a scene here's a scene from the book that I would like you to convey in art. Whereas this one I had a much stronger idea. I mean, I know my art, my hand sketch is rough, but that was what I sent to them. Whereas in the first one, I didn't have font, I didn't have anything where I wanted them on the page. I said, here's a paragraph that I would like you to convey. Have at it. And so this one was a lot more constrained, and so I was impressed in two different ways between the two covers. And I can actually show you. Here's a nice comparison of them side by side. So the first one, the one on the left, book 1, I sent them a paragraph. I didn't really have any. I had a loose idea of what I wanted, and they completely floored me with it. And then the second. I'm sorry?
Sorry, I was going to say, I think what's kind of interesting with this comparison with them side to side, this is the first time I've seen them side to side, by the way, is that they've both, with the second one, they've both taken the style of the first book and they've kind of matured it and advanced it a little bit, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to see where that's going. So yeah, well done.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, because it definitely was a different artist who did the first one to the second one.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to kind of recreate some of those same assets. So the format, the font, there's kind of this little lighting effect coming off the title itself. So it sort of has like almost a shadow effect.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the journey that I went on. And it was again, really, really impressive. I think with the exception of the draft 0.0, which again would have worked for the first book, but because I already had the first book, no longer worked. It was wonderful art, but it wasn't the cover that I wanted. So with the exception of that, I really do think that their cover designs were almost exactly what I wanted from the get-go. And so that was just really impressive to me.
So my question is, with the kind of draft that you kind of rejected,
Mm-hmm.
it's a wonderful piece of art. Do you see a place for it anywhere else in the kind of like series? It could possibly work on the inside of the book, in other places, maybe not on the cover per se.
It might, but remember, I didn't purchase that cover, so I don't own that in any way. I'm just using it as an example. That's why I threw in the watermark there, so that way, hopefully, nobody else can possibly use that.
We hope.
I mean, it has to be said that you need to check what licenses you have with your cover images and whether you can use them for social media posts, whether they can include like a bundle with specifically sized images for that and for merchandising. It's not automatically approved for use on like t-shirts and what have you, whether that's down to the design company or whether it's down to the license they use with the stock image sites. So that all needs to be checked out before you do anything like that.
I think following on from that, and sorry Ben, I'm going to jump in. I think following on from that, it's important to realise that when you buy a cover from a design place like this, you are not buying a cover. You are buying a license for a cover. And so you need to be kind of familiar with that and the kind of terms of that, because obviously getting into kind of like copyright territory is not where you want to be going down in terms of like falling foul of that. So just be mindful that you are not just buying an image that you can do carte blanche what you want. You can chop it up or do whatever. I mean, I suppose you can.
And again, when you have people who are paying like the kind of numbers we were speaking about earlier, that's some of what you're paying for a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think if you want that kind of like outright and carte blanche opportunity to do literally what you like with the image, you would have to be prepared to pay for it, and quite a considerable amount of money as well.
And I believe that's what I have with Meeble Art. I'll have to check the agreement again, but I'm fairly certain that I can, as you mentioned, chop it up and do whatever I want with the images. And that's actually what I did do with the bookmarks and the little magnets and stickers that I made with it, because the image works well, but shrinking it down into a bookmark size, which is, a lot longer than it is wide, it doesn't really fit anymore within the book. So it kind of didn't work, and I had to adjust a couple of different pieces here and there. I think in one of the versions I actually had to reverse the image on it, so that way it would fit with the title too.
I think they're quite generous in terms of they will give you the flattened image that you can just turn the text off on, and you can do what you like with. I think with some cover places you do have to pay for that option to have like the source file that you can kind of poke around in to a degree. I know with my cover there was some scope to play with the finished Photoshop file, but obviously I didn't really want to get too drawn into that. I mean, I did kind of adapt it a little bit for my social media posts that I did create, and this is where I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent, that I think self-published authors, even if they are commissioning a cover, you should have some basic Photoshop skills to do simple tasks like this without having to pay someone to do everything. So it's worth kind of skilling yourself up just a little bit in some basic image manipulation, so you can do stuff and save a bit of money, to be fair, because obviously being self-published, you are a business, and you have obviously got your profit and loss, etc. So you want to bear that in mind. So it's worth sort of mentioning, I feel, when we're talking about manipulating the cover for our own purposes. You don't necessarily have to buy the media kit. I mean, were you happy with the media kit that you got, Ben?
Absolutely. It includes 3D images. It includes a whole bunch of different things for Facebook, etc. And I do have I keep saying PowerPoint, but I do have the raw image file that I can use to sort of manipulate in Photoshop. So that does give me some more freedoms. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because, my wife is significantly better at Photoshop than I am. So I can basically hit the image with a hammer and get some stuff kind of done. And that's what I did. I had to do a little bit of tweaking for the final version of the book, namely because I changed the text on the blurb and like one or two other. Oh, I had to add in the barcode.
Yeah.
But a lot of those bookmark and the images that I used for the stickers, where you had to do some fine manipulations, there's my attempt at it, and then my wife's just like, you know what, Ben, let me just do it. Like, I'll make it look better in half the time. So
that's good.
There's that.
I mean, actually, talking about that, it's worth being able to kind of do that, even when you're like assembling your final cover, when you have to move things slightly to make them line up, and being able to do that on your own, or knowing someone, or in your case, being married to someone who can do it for you, is really.
Yeah, I can move things left and right a little bit. I can do some stuff, but to do something well and to make it look good, that is beyond my skills.
We're not necessarily saying you should marry someone because they're good at Photoshop.
To be fair, I didn't know she was good at Photoshop until well after I had been married. So, and let's shift ahead to looking forward. So, Martin, you are well on the way to coming out with the sequel and the finale of the trilogy of the McMurdo Rift. Are you also going to continue? I know it's a partnership.
Not the finale. It's actually a series of 6.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm ridiculously ambitious.
I'm sorry. I thought. Did it originally start off as a trilogy?
No.
Okay. Then I'm completely wrong on that one.
We just didn't dare talk about anything past book 3 and let people decide. Can you throw the slides up again?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I didn't have Facebook up. Martin, do you want me to show the previous image, or do you want me to just show withdrawal?
Oh, yes.
All right, I guess I'll do it. It's a joke for Richard, I guess.
Is it at my expense?
Possibly. It's his own version of your upcoming book. But this is what we are working with. We have this one, we have this one, and then we have this one. I really wish I would have gotten the raw view, but so yeah, this is Martin's take on Richard's book, I believe, Price War, or it might just be a tagline or a promotion for it.
If you want to find out more about this book, subscribe to my newsletter.
So this is the part of the show where everything just goes off the rails, but in all seriousness, we have Martin's actual covers.
So when I was designing book one, I appreciated that sorting out the planet and the nebula was the heavy lifting, and all I needed to do, so withdrawal is the reader magnet, the prequel you can get signing up for the newsletter at bradleylejeune.com. So all I needed to do was retexture the planet and tweak the hue saturation layer on the nebula. I don't know how long I spent on book one's cover, but probably 10 to 20 hours, whereas withdrawal, that needed about half an hour because the work was already done. I just one of the biggest hurdles was finding planet textures, because there's freely available ones for the solar system and like the moons of Saturn and what have you, but for an Earth-like planet it gets a bit complicated. But I have now developed a way of doing that and will be doing that going forwards. But yeah, just once you swap out the planet and ship elements, you've got a completely different cover in the style of the series.
I agree.
I do like that, because I never noticed this before, but now that I'm seeing them side by side and hearing you say that, the nebula in the background is the same copy and pasted, just with a different filter, which is really kind of cool. And just to ask, your new spaceships, did you do the same thing that you did with the original one, where you just kind of found it and hired found models pretty cheaply?
Those are all from the same stock library. One thing that really gets under my skin, which no one will ever notice, is on the right-hand image, if you zoom completely in, there's actually an empty seat in the cockpit.
Well, we're talking about how the covers will basically be, thumbnail sized, so I don't think anybody's going to zoom in that much. Or if the versions that the book ultimately will be can even have the pixelated, the pixels to zoom in that much and recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you want, I'd be willing to draw in a little stick figure to add in right there, if you don't mind my fantastic art skills. And moving on, we have Richard with the prequel, right? Yeah, Foundation prequel.
So I'll talk you through this a little bit. So Foundations is the reader magnet / prequel to Nightmare Tenant. So first of all, as a reader magnet, I decided to treat it as seriously as a legit book release, because if you want your newsletter readers to take it seriously, you need to take it seriously. This is like you setting out your stall and thinking, this is my free piece of work, come and have a look. So that is why I actually went to the expense of commissioning a cover for my reader magnet, even though I have pretty much no chance of recouping that cost, but I put it down as a marketing cost. So again, I went to the same designer, because I wanted them to, obviously, like Martin's, to be thematically similar. So there's a lot of different differences there. I kind of wanted to go for like an opposite color palette, which is why I went for the kind of flames. And again, the cement mixer has weird magic coming out of it, which is possibly story related. I mean, you'll have
That's
to
not strictly true of most cement mixers.
Sorry?
That's not strictly true of most cement mixers.
Yeah, and also I kind of went for the same structure with the cover here. So I decided to have the two images, top and bottom, that kind of juxtaposed each other and sort of complemented and kind of flowed together. And I think the designer didn't really need much kind of like, pushing. There was an early draft where I had a different image at the bottom because I just couldn't quite find an image to use at the bottom. But then I found that kind of crypt image and it fits in with the story absolutely perfectly. So I think it both complements and contrasts with the first book. I mean, you can kind of tell that they are related.
Oh, they certainly feel similar.
They exist in their own spaces too. And I think it worked really well. I mean, again, when I got that cover design, I mean, I actually initiated quite a major change after I got the first draft, which was to change out one of the images. And the designer was very accommodating, didn't charge me any extra for that, just did it basically. So I was really happy with it, and I think they are two covers of mine that I'm just really pleased with. And I just look, they're really good, and I'm really proud of them.
And so many people don't bother with a proper cover for a reader magnet, and you look at the places where people are doing newsletter swaps, and it's such an easy win to stand out. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned, these two really do feel similar, and it's something so simple in that your text is the same. I mean, you have you have the top image, the bottom image, true, but it's also the word placement and the actual text, the way that's sort of almost ethereal, where it looks kind of like a ghost image, where it's faded a little bit, and that makes these two definitely feel linked, which is really, really good for
like what
that they're in the same universe.
Yeah, like with what Martin said, I think it's such an easy win. If you want to kind of swap newsletters, you need, again, it's a marketing tool, so don't expect newsletter swaps to work if your cover, which is what is going to draw people in, because in most newsletter swaps, it's going to be your cover only that is the element that is used. If you're lucky, it's going to be your blurb. But for quite a lot of the newsletter swaps I've done, it's literally just the cover that gets included in like a gallery of newsletter swaps. And so if you've cheaped out or just thrown something together that may stand next to covers that have been professionally designed, you're going to kind of lose potential clicks there, and it's going to impact your kind of author career in the long run, because you're not going to have them as newsletter subscribers and potential customers that you can market to directly.
Richard took me rather literally when I said that your reader magnet is the foundations of all your marketing going forwards.
Sorry, let me bring this up one more time. Foundations is the name of the reader magnet.
It works on multiple levels.
Yeah. But yes, thank you. Thank you for explaining and reiterating how the cover matters. And if you aren't artistically gifted in conceiving the ideas for the cover or in creating the images themselves, then yes, seek professional cover designers or get really, really good in working in Photoshop or training yourself or doing market research to figure out exactly what works for your book genre and how you want your book to be conveyed to the world, even if it is only in a small image on whatever publisher, seller, retailer's page.
Or just marry someone who can do it for you.
I have no rebuttal.
Keep that recorded, and if he ever gets married, I'm jumping up in the church. I object. He's only marrying her for her Photoshop skills, and she'll be like, "Is this true?" and slap him with the bouquet.
And on that note, those are all the questions I have. Do you guys have any other additional comments about cover designs, about the process as a whole, about finding professional artists, or about learning the tools that you use to design covers?
My kind of thing would be just work on your brief, and if your cover designer can accomplish 70% of that, then you should be pretty happy with that. I think, especially if you have a kind of solid idea in your mind, you have to kind of be prepared to kind of compromise, I think, a little bit. But just go in with an open mind, think about what you want, look for covers that inspire you or that you think your book would look good next to, and just kind of send them along and kind of find designers that you trust, that you have recommendations of friends of. Like the 2 designers I've used, I found them out wholly through recommendations through Hannah for the Nightmare Tenant one, and for my new book from Ben's cover, which is really good. So yeah, no pressure, but if it's crap, Ben, I'm going to send you the bill.
Fair enough. Well, you don't actually pay until you get the final result, right?
That's correct. I have to say, Meblot's kind of commissioning process has been very kind of user friendly, and you don't feel like you're being hassled for money. And my final kind of thought is, this is a marketing tool. Be prepared to invest in it as such.
We'll definitely have to bring you back on to see how the end result looks, or to follow your newsletter and see what images they produce. Thank you.
I need to commission someone to make me a new one of these.
Martin?
If you're going to design your own cover, only do it if you can do it well. And if you think you can do it well, find the meanest people you can and see.
Define well.
Well, if you go into the nearest bookshop and your cover was in between all the others in your genre, would it look out of place? Or would someone go, well, that looks good considering it was made by you? And if people who have no reason to be, nice to you say, yes, that's of a standard, then you should be okay. And if you're working with a designer, part of what you're paying for is they should know the genre and they should have ideas, and you should see where they want to go. That's part of the service they offer. And if they don't have ideas, then they might not be the right match for you.
Or if they're only using stock images, or it feels like they sort of have an assembly line of various templates for the covers, and then they sort of just design it to match what you want. Like again, you aren't getting quite the custom feeling that you might want. Mm-hmm. Or that might be perfectly fine, because they might still have a really good model, character models that work, and you just enter in your own character's features within your story, and that works out perfectly. So
that's
again,
a good question, Ben. I'm going to add another question to you, because we're never going to wrap this up otherwise. So my question to you based on that point is, what do you think of pre-made covers?
Perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. Again, if it fits with your story, go for it. Use it however you want to convey your book to the world. Like you said, that is your greatest marketing tool. So make sure that you are at least 70% happy with it. That's the number that you mentioned earlier. So if you think that it can help sell your books, if you are proud of the end result, if you are happy with the way that it introduces your story to the world, if you are comfortable with somebody looking at that without reading the blurb, just taking a look at the front image on the cover and deciding whether or not they even want to bother reading the blurb, if you're comfortable with whatever version of the cover that you have, go for it. However you got there.
My question to kind of follow up Martin's point is, what do you think about using a pre-made for the reader magnet?
Go for it. Again, same
good
thing.
Idea. If you don't want to outlay something bespoke or go for perhaps a cheaper option, and that's probably still effective or more effective than what you could do yourself, right, then I totally think pre-mades for reader magnets, sure, why not?
Mm-hmm.
One thing that should be mentioned as well is if you nip out tomorrow and buy a copy of The Great Gatsby, it's not going to have the original cover, which is a crying shame because that's a beautiful cover. And covers are not forever, they're for Christmas. And, you know, a lot of the successful indie publishers and a lot of the successful publishers swap out their covers every couple of years to keep up with the latest genre styles. And whatever you go for, you know, it doesn't have to be forever.
Excellent point. Excellent point. But again, that is another cost benefit analysis that you need to do, an ROI calculation, where if it takes another 100, another 200, another 300, another $1,000 to get that new version, will you be able to sell enough books based on that update to make it worthwhile? And that is a very important decision that each of us needs to determine on our own.
100%.
Again, I'm wrapping up now, but I want to thank both of you for coming on. This was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Let's go counterclockwise this time. Richard, where can people find you? What are you working on? What's coming out soon? What do you want to tease that title that's currently being worked on, even though I did kind of show the joke version of a potential marketing campaign?
The joke version that might be the real version, who's to say? Yeah, I have to say this has been a really good discussion. I've really enjoyed it. I'm really glad to have been invited on. You know, I am currently the author of Nightmare Tenant, but I am soon to be the author of Nightmare Tenant and Price War, the first book in said series. So if you want to find out about that, then you know what to do. Subscribe to my newsletter. Do it now. Yeah, so I'm basically just a horror/thriller/sci-fi author from the UK.
Martin, how about yourself? We hinted at withdrawal, but do you have more information for us?
Yeah, so withdrawal, the reader magnet to the McMurdo Rift. You can read that on bradleylejeune.com, and you can buy the McMurdo Rift right now on Amazon by Bradley Lejeune. Sign up at bradleylejeune.com for the newsletter. If you like books with spaceships and planets and nebula, you will love it.
It is fantastic, by the way. I have my own copy. I don't want to... Let me see if I can pull this one off. Did I? Nope, not even close. Wrong book. Somewhere on this bookshelf is your book. I pulled out the wrong book, so I don't really want to go there. Anyways, let's bring this whole thing to a close. I am Ben Pick, running to write. And coming up on December 3rd at Saturday, December 3rd at noon, I will be having my book launch party for Expanding Cracks, the second book in the Into the Void series. I hope you join me there. There'll be games, there'll be prizes. It'll be a lot of fun. And hopefully you two guys can show up and bring your own brand of chaos. Yes, so that is, again, Saturday, December 3rd at noon. My book will be available. It is actually available currently for a pre-order, so I'm going to include a link in the description below if you are so interested. The ebook version is currently available. I'm still kind of working with some issues through Ingram to get the paperback version available as well. Hopefully everything gets worked out. We'll see. This is coming down to the deadline, and I will see you all next week. Happy Thanksgiving for those who support it, or happy Thanksgiving for those of you who celebrate it. Enjoy the time with your families, and I will see you all next time. Take care.